What if I told you? The most powerful Alpha King in history was brought to his knees, not by war, not by armies, but by one Omega who looked him in the eye, in front of his entire kingdom, and asked, "Can I truly buy you?" Sudden silence. A crown hits marble with a deafening clang. Cut to King Azric on his knees. Storm gray eyes locked on hers. His answer froze every soul in the realm. "And it will shatter yours." This is the story they tried to bury. The love they called impossible. The night a king admitted he was already conquered, and an Omega taught the world that the strongest throne is the one built on two hearts that refuse to bow. Stay until the end. You won't just watch this love story. You'll feel it rewrite everything you believe about power. Welcome to the legend that begins with a question no one dared ask, and ends with a kingdom that learned to kneel. "Can I truly buy you?" the Omega asked the Alpha King. His reply froze the whole kingdom. Before we continue, kindly tell us where you are watching from, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button, because every day we have an amazing story that will make your day. Chapter 1: The Price No One Dared Name. The throne room smelled of wax, winter pine, and fear. Hundreds of wolves, dukes in silver chains, generals in black armor, scholars clutching ancient scrolls stood in perfect silence beneath banners older than memory. Tonight was the night of binding, when the unmated king could choose an Omega, or choose none. No one had ever reversed the ritual. No one had ever tried, until me. My name is Lyria Vane, last daughter of a fallen house. I wore mourning white instead of the traditional red of offering. My hair was unbound, a river of ink down my back. My scent, soft jasmine and rain on stone, drifted ahead of me like a confession. Every step toward the obsidian throne felt like walking deeper into a dream I would never wake from. King Azric watched me approach. Legend said his eyes were the color of a storm about to break. They were right. He sat motionless, one gloved hand resting on the pommel of the sword no one had ever seen him draw. The crown of black iron and moonstone looked heavier than mountains on his brow. I stopped at the foot of the dais. Then I did the unthinkable. I did not kneel. I stood straight, chin high, and spoke so every wolf in the hall could hear. "Your Majesty," I began, voice clear as winter bells, "for 7 years I have watched you rule alone. I have watched you carry a kingdom that would have crushed any other soul. I have watched you refuse every alliance, every offered Omega, every crowned princess from across the sea, because none of us were what you were waiting for." A ripple of shock moved through the court. "I am not here to be chosen tonight," I continued. "I am here to choose." Someone dropped a goblet. It rang like a gunshot. I drew a single rolled parchment from my sleeve, the deed to every acre of land, every vineyard, every mine, every coin left in the vein vaults, and let it fall at his feet. "I offer everything I own, everything I am, everything I will ever be." My voice cracked, but I did not look away. "I am so in love with you that the thought of living in a world where I am not yours truly, willingly, irrevocably yours, feels like dying every morning I wake up without you." Tears slipped free, but I smiled through them. "So I ask you, King Azric of House Vale, King of the 7 territories, Wolf of Winter itself, in front of your laws, your court, your gods." I finally sank to one knee, not in surrender, but in offering. "Can I truly buy you?" The silence that followed was deeper than any grave. For 10 full seconds, the kingdom did not breathe. Then the king moved. He stood, slowly, deliberately. He descended the 7 steps until he stood before me. Close enough that I could see the faint scar through his left eyebrow. Close enough that his scent, snow on cedar, smoke on steel, wrapped around me like arms I had dreamed of for years. Every wolf waited for the refusal, for the cold laugh, for the exile. Instead, King Azric did something no chronicle had ever recorded. He lowered himself to one knee. The King of Wolves knelt to an Omega in mourning white. Gasps turned into a wave of pure shock. A duchess fainted. The high priest dropped his staff. Azric took my shaking hands in his. His palms were warm, calloused, steady. "Lyria Vane," he said, and his voice low, rough, ancient, carried to the rafters. "Do you know why I have refused every offered bond for 7 years?" I couldn't speak. I shook my head. "Because none of them saw me." His thumb brushed over my knuckles like he was memorizing the feel of my skin. They saw the crown, the throne, the power. They wanted to be saved by it, or to save me from it. But you. His storm eyes softened into something unbearably gentle. You saw the man who sits up at night wondering if he is ruling his people, or simply keeping them from tearing one another apart until he dies doing it. You saw the man who is tired of being unbreakable. A single tear slid down my cheek. He caught it with his lips. So no, little star, he whispered, loud enough for history to hear. You cannot buy me. My heart shattered quietly in my chest. Then he smiled, small, crooked, devastating. Because I was never for sale. I was waiting for the one person brave enough to offer me the only currency that matters. He pressed my palm over his heart. It thundered beneath armor and linen. Love without chains. Choice without force. A future I actually want to wake up to. He turned my hand, kissed the center of my palm like a vow. So here is my counteroffer, Lyria, of House Vane. Take everything I have, my crown, my name, my protection, my life, and I will spend every day proving I am worth the heart you just laid at my feet. Then, still on his knees, he looked up at the stunned court and declared, let the scribes write this. On this night the king was bought not with gold but with courage, and the king paid gladly. He rose, pulling me with him, and tucked me against his side like I had always belonged there. The throne room finally exhaled, and then erupted into the loudest, wildest cheer the castle had ever known. But I barely heard it, because King Azric leaned down, lips against my ear, and whispered the words that would be retold for 1,000 years. You didn't buy me, Lyria, you freed me, and I will love you for it until the stars burn out. Chapter 2, The night the crown knelt. The roar of the throne room still echoed in my ears, when Azric's arm tightened around my waist and he turned us toward the eastern archway. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Court is adjourned. Permanently, if necessary. 100 nobles surged forward at once. Your Majesty, this is unprecedented. The law demands. You cannot simply. Azric did not slow. He walked as though the protests were wind. I had to half run to keep pace, my hands still bare feet slipping on the polished floor. My wrist, where he had kissed it moments ago, burned with the ghost of his lips. Behind us, Lord Commander, Rhaegar broad as an oak, silver streaking his beard, planted himself at the foot of the dais, and drew his sword across the path of the advancing council. By order of your king, he bellowed, stand down, or be removed. Some obeyed, most did not. We reached the private corridor that led to the royal apartments. The massive ironwood doors slammed shut behind us, muffling the uproar to a dull thunder. Torches here burned low and blue, the flame of the old kings. Only then did Azric stop. He released me so suddenly, I swayed. For one heartbeat I thought he regretted everything. Then he pressed his forehead to the cool stone wall, shoulders rising and falling too fast. Azric, I whispered. He laughed once, a cracked, disbelieving sound. I just knelt, he said to the wall. In front of every wolf who ever swore I was born without knees. I stepped closer. You did. I threatened to burn the binding laws that have stood for 8 centuries. You did. He turned. The storm in his eyes had broken into something rawer than rain. And I have never, he said, voice dropping to a whisper only I could hear, felt more like a king than I do right now. He reached for me again, slower this time, giving me space to pull away. I didn't. His hands settled at my waist as though they had been carved to fit there. I meant every word, Lyria, but the council will fight this with teeth and claws. They will say I have lost my mind. They will say an Omega cannot. They can say whatever they want. I cut in, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. I asked if I could buy you. You answered. The bargain is struck. Let them choke on it. His mouth curved, half pride, half fear. You do not understand what you have unleashed. Then explain it to me. He exhaled, long and slow. There is an ancient clause. Article 7 of the Founding Pact. If a sovereign's chosen bond is deemed unworthy by a majority of the high seats, the bond can be dissolved by trial of worth. 3 tasks. Impossible tasks. Designed centuries ago to prevent exactly this, a ruler choosing with his heart, instead of his head. My stomach dropped. And if I fail? The bond is severed. You walk free. I remain king, alone. His jaw flexed. They will invoke it at dawn. I searched his face. Do you want me to withdraw the offer? I will, if it keeps your throne safe. He silenced me with a look so fierce it stole my breath. Listen to me carefully, little star. He cupped my face in both hands. I have worn this crown since I was 19 years old. I have killed for it, bled for it, buried friends and brothers, parents for it. And tonight, for the first time, I understood it was nothing but iron and lies until the moment you stood in front of me and offered me a reason to keep breathing. A tear slipped down my cheek. He caught it with his thumb. I will burn the throne to ash before I have to. But I will not let them take you from me. The corridor felt suddenly too small, the air too thin. I rose on my toes and pressed my forehead to his. Then we faced the trial together, I said. He closed his eyes as though my words were a balm on an old wound. Together, footsteps pounded outside the doors, growing louder. Shouts, the ring of steel. Azric straightened, every inch the war king again, but he kept one of my hands locked in his. They're coming to drag me to the council chamber, he said quietly. They will demand I renounce you tonight, before the trial can even be declared. I lifted my chin. Let them try. The doors burst open. 20 royal guards stood aside as 7 high lords swept in, robes swirling like vultures. Lord Gavron, oldest and cruelest, stepped forward, parchment trembling in his spotted hands. By the authority vested. Azric's snarl stopped him mid-sentence. It was not loud. It was the sound a wolf makes right before it rips out a throat. Touch her, Azric said, voice deadly soft, and I abdicate at sunrise. The crown passes to whichever of you thinks he can hold it, when every pack in the north learns their king stepped down for love. Civil war by spring. Is that what you want, Gavron? The old lord's mouth worked soundlessly. Azric continued, calm and merciless. Or you can grant us the trial of worth, as the law allows. Let her prove what my heart already knows. And when she passes, because she will, you will kneel, same as I did, and swear fealty to your future queen. Silence stretched, thin and sharp as drawn wire. Finally Gavron lowered the parchment. The trial begins at first light, he rasped. 3 tasks. Fail 1, and the bond is void. Azric inclined his head, regal and unafraid. Accepted. The lords filed out, fury and fear written on every face. When the doors closed again, Azric sagged almost imperceptibly. I slipped my arms around his waist and held on. I'm terrified, I admitted against his chest. He rested his chin atop my head. Good. Fear means you understand how much this matters. We stood like that until the torches burned low. Eventually he pulled back, just far enough to look at me. There is one more thing, he said, voice rough. Tonight the entire castle will expect me to claim you in the old way, to seal the bond before the trial can dissolve it. If we do not, he swallowed, they will say it was never real. My heart hammered. And if we do? His eyes searched mine, ancient and gentle and desperate all at once. Then nothing on earth or above it can take you from me. But only if it is truly your choice. I will not have you because tradition demands it. I will have you only because you say yes. I rose on my toes again and kissed the corner of his mouth, soft, certain. My answer has been yes since I was 17 years old and watched you spare an enemy who had surrendered. I just needed the rest of the world to catch up. Relief and reverence broke across his face like sunrise. He scooped me into his arms as though I weighed nothing and carried me deeper into the royal wing. Past guards who dropped to their knees at the sight of their king carrying an Omega in mourning white like she was already crowned. Behind us, in the empty corridor, a single jasmine petal fallen from my hair lay on the stone, and somewhere in the distance, the first pale hint of dawn began to bruise the sky. The trial of worth was coming. But tonight, the king had already surrendered. Chapter 3. 3 Tasks for a Queen. Dawn bled pale gold across the sky when the great bronze gong sounded over Castle Vale. I had not slept, neither had Azric. We stood on the wide balcony of the king's chamber, still dressed in the clothes we had worn the night before. My mourning white was wrinkled now. His black tunic was unbuttoned at the throat. His hand rested over mine on the stone balustrade, thumb tracing slow circles across my knuckles as though he watched the horizon turn from ash to fire. They will come for you soon, he said quietly. I know. They will not be gentle. I know that too. He turned to me then, eyes fierce and tired and impossibly tender. Whatever they ask, remember this. You are not proving yourself to them. You are proving them wrong. The gong sounded a second time. Closer. Azric leaned down and pressed one slow, deliberate kiss to my forehead, breathing me in like I was air and he had been drowning for years. Then the doors opened. Lord Commander Rhaegar entered first, followed by the 7 High Lords in their ceremonial crimson. Behind them walked the High Seer, blindfolded in white silk, carrying the ancient scroll of tasks, sealed with black wax. Rhaegar's gaze flicked to our joined hands, then to Azric's face. Something almost like pride flashed across the old warrior's features before he dropped to one knee. My king, my lady. He used the title deliberately. Several lords flinched. The trial begins. Azric squeezed my fingers once, then let go. I stepped forward alone. The High Seer broke the seal. Her voice, though sightless, carried like winter wind. Lyria of House Vane, who would buy a king with love alone? Here are the 3 tasks that will weigh your worth. First task, the Vault of Forgotten Truths. Enter the forbidden archives beneath the castle before sunset. Find the single volume that records the true reason the binding laws were written. Return with it unopened, unread by any other soul. Fail, and the bond is forfeit. Second task, the Mirror of Unmaking. Face what you fear most, and speak its name aloud. The mirror must break from the force of your honesty. Third task, the Circle of 7. Stand before the High Lords who despise your king, and make them choose you freely. One refusal ends the trial. She rolled the scroll shut. The silence was suffocating. Lord Gavern stepped forward, smug venom in his smile. You may begin at the next bell, alone. No aid from the king. No weapons, no light but what the archives allow. Azric's growl rumbled through the marble floor, but I laid a hand on his arm. I accept, I said. Gavrin's eyebrows shot up. He had expected pleading, bargaining, tears. He got none. The third bell rang. Rhaegar opened a small iron door set low in the wall when I had never noticed before. Stone steps spiraled down into darkness that smelled of dust and old grief. Azric caught my wrist before I descended. Lyria, his voice was raw. The archives are a maze. Thousands of wolves have entered. Dozens never returned. I touched his cheek. Then I will be the first to return with the truth. He closed his eyes, pressed his lips to my palm, and let me go. The door shut behind me with a sound like a coffin lid. Darkness swallowed me whole. I walked downward for what felt like hours. The air grew colder, heavier. My breath fogged. The steps ended in a circular chamber, lit only by veins of pale crystal pulsing in the walls. Thousands of shelves stretched into shadow, filled with books that whispered when I passed. Some called my name. Some wept. One laughed like my mother the day she died. I did not stop. In the center of the chamber stood a pedestal. On it rested a single volume bound in white leather wolfskin, ancient and soft. No title, no lock. Every instinct screamed trap. I reached out anyway. The moment my fingers touched the cover, memories that were not mine flooded me. A queen centuries ago, Omega, born, standing exactly where I stood now. A king who loved her so fiercely, he rewrote the laws to keep her. The nobles who feared love more than war, who invented the binding laws not to protect Omegas, but to make sure no Omega ever held real power again. I saw the queen forced to watch her king marry another. I saw her walk into the snow and never return. Tears streamed down my face, but I did not open the book. The task was to bring it back unopened, unread by any other soul. I had seen enough. I tucked it inside my gown, against my heart, and began the long climb upward. When I emerged into the dawn light, the entire court waited in the great hall. I was covered in dust, hair wild, cheeks streaked with tears. The book was warm against my skin like a living thing. I walked straight to Azric and placed it in his hands. He stared at me, stunned. You found it. I felt her, I whispered. The first Omega who tried what I'm trying now. She failed because no one stood with her. Azric's eyes glistened. And you? I'm not alone. Lord Gavron snatched the book before Azric could open it. He flipped through blank pages. Every word had vanished the moment I decided not to read them aloud. Gavrin's face purpled. This is trickery. No, the High Seer said calmly. It is mercy. The archives gave her the truth and let her choose silence. First task complete. A murmur swept the hall, half triumph, half fury. Azric pulled me against his side, uncaring who saw. One down, he murmured into my hair. Two remain. But across the hall, a new figure stepped from the shadows. A woman in silver robes, face hidden beneath a hood. She moved with the quiet authority of someone who had not been invited yet, could not be refused. She stopped before the dais and lowered her hood. The scar that ran from her left temple to her jaw was unmistakable. It was Queen Mother Isolde, Azric's mother, who had vanished the night he took the throne 15 years ago. Every wolf in the room dropped to their knees, except Azric. He went white as winter bone. Mother, the word cracked in half. Isolde's eyes storm gray, exactly like his found mine. Hello, my son, she said softly. I believe I am needed for the second task. She turned to me, and the look she gave me was not kind, not cruel. It was measuring. The mirror of unmaking awaits, child, she said, and it never lies. My heart thundered against the second task, had just become infinitely more dangerous. Because the woman who had once tried to sell her own son's hand for peace, was now the only one who could guide me to the mirror, or destroy me before I ever reached it. Chapter 4. The Book That Remembered Everything. The hall was so quiet, I could hear my own pulse. Queen Mother Isolde stood in the center of the marble floor, like a ghost who had decided the living world still owed her something. 15 years gone, and she looked barely older than Azric. Only the silver in her black hair and the scar across her face told the story of exile. Azric had not moved. His hand on my waist had turned to iron. Isolde's gaze moved from her son to me, slow and deliberate. The second task is mine to oversee, she said. Her voice was low, melodic, and edged with winter. The mirror has been kept in my old solar since the night I left. No one else may enter with the challenger. A ripple of protest rose. Lord Gavron opened his mouth, then shut it when Isolde lifted one finger. Those are the ancient rules, she reminded him. Even you cannot rewrite them before breakfast, Gavron. Azric finally found his voice. It came out hoarse. You have no right to be here. I have every right, Isolde answered. I am still Dowager. I am still the last person who faced that mirror and walked out alive. And I am the only one who knows which door leads to it. She turned to me. Come, child, or forfeit now. I felt Azric's fingers tighten, ready to refuse for me. I covered his hand with mine. I'll go, I said softly. This is the task. I will not fail it because I was afraid of a ghost. His jaw worked. He leaned close so only I could hear. If she harms one hair on your head, then you will burn the world down. I finished for him. I know. Save the fire. I may need it later. A pained laugh escaped him. He kissed my temple once, fierce and swift, then stepped back. Isolde was already walking. I followed. We climbed a narrow servant's stair that smelled of cold stone and forgotten roses. At the top was a round door bound in iron. Isolde pressed her palm to it. Runes flared silver, and the door swung inward without a sound. Inside was a chamber bathed in moonlight, though the sun was high outside. In the center stood the mirror of unmaking, tall, oval, framed in blackened bone. Its surface was not glass but liquid night, swirling slowly. Isolde closed the door. The click echoed like a lock turning on my fate. Only one question is asked, she said. The mirror shows you the thing that will unmake you. You must name it aloud. If you lie, it shatters you instead of itself. If you refuse to speak, it shatters you. If you speak truth, it breaks, I finished. She studied me for a long moment. You look like her, she said suddenly. The queen who first built this mirror. The Omega who loved a king so much, she invented the trial to keep him safe from her. She failed the second task. The mirror showed her the king's death at her hands. She could not bear the truth, so she lied. The mirror took her life instead. My throat closed. Isolde stepped aside. It is time. I walked forward until my reflection should have appeared. Instead, the surface rippled and showed me nothing but darkness. Then it brightened, and I saw Azric on the throne, older, silver at his temples, eyes empty. a crown of black thorns around his brow, chains of iron linking his wrists to the arms of the chair, and me standing behind him, hand on his shoulder, smiling like a jailer. The vision spoke with my own voice. To keep him safe, you will cage him. To keep him alive, you will kill the parts of him that make life worth living. You will become the very laws you hate. He will love you until his last breath, and he will hate you for every one of them. I stumbled back. The mirror rippled again. Now it showed Azric kneeling not in love, but in defeat while I wore the crown and the kingdom burned behind us. My knees hit the floor. Isolde's voice was gentle now, almost kind. Name it, child. Name your fear. Tears blurred everything. That I will destroy him, I whispered. That my love is the poison he will drink gladly because he thinks it is medicine. That I will become the thing he needs protecting from. The mirror trembled. I forced myself upright. But that is only half the truth, I said, louder. The whole truth is this. I am terrified I am not strong enough to love him without chaining him, and I am more terrified than I am. The surface cracked, a single fracture running from top to bottom like lightning frozen in glass. Isolde's breath caught. I stepped closer, tears falling freely. So here is my real fear, mirror, I said. That one day he will look at me and see the bars I built around his heart, and forgive me for it. Because he is kind, because he is good, and because he thinks he deserves the cage if it keeps me safe. The crack widened. Light poured out, white and blinding. I refuse to let that future happen, I said. Even if it means walking away. Even if it breaks me first. His freedom is worth more than my happiness. The mirror shattered, not into shards, into starlight. 1,000 soft motes of silver that drifted around me like snow, then dissolved. Silence. Isolde stared at the empty frame as though she had seen a ghost die twice. Impossible, she breathed. It has never broken gently before. I wiped my face. Maybe it was tired of being cruel. She looked at me, then really looked hand. Something shifted behind her storm gray eyes. You are not her, she said quietly. You are braver. Footsteps thundered outside. The door flew open. Azric stood there, wild-eyed, chest heaving. He must have run the entire way when he heard the mirror break. He took one look at my tears and started toward Isolde with murder in his face. I caught his arm. It's over, I said. I passed. Only then did he see the empty frame. His gaze snapped to his mother. Isolde lifted her chin. She spoke a truth sharp enough to free even the mirror. Second task complete. Azric pulled me into his arms so fiercely my feet left the ground. You're shaking, he whispered against my hair. So are you, I whispered back. Behind us, Isolde spoke again, softer. There is still the third task, my son, the circle of 7. And I have a vote that has always been mine to cast. Azric stiffened. Isolde met his eyes the same color as hers, and, for the first time, I saw something like regret flicker across her face. Bring her to the circle at moonrise, she said. I will be there. She walked past us, pausing only to lay a hand hesitant trembling on Azric's shoulder for a single heartbeat. Then, she was gone. Azric looked down at me, fear and wonder warring in his expression. 2 tasks, he said. 1 remains. I rested my head against his chest and listened to his heart trying to outrun the future. And the hardest one is always the last, I said. Somewhere below, the castle bells began to toll moonrise. The circle of 7 was waiting, and the woman who had once abandoned her son was holding the final key. Chapter 5, The Price of Sight. The war horns were still echoing in my ears when Azric pulled me into the moonlit corridor outside the circle chamber. His hands framed my face, searching every tear track as if they were wounds. You are trembling, he whispered. So are you, I answered, because his fingers shook against my skin. He pressed his forehead to forehead, breathing me in like medicine. They want my happiness or my crown, I said against his lips. I chose your happiness. I will always choose it. A broken sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. You just handed them the perfect weapon, he said. They will say I am unfit because my queen values me above the realm. I drew back far enough to meet his storm gray eyes. Then let us take the weapon away. I turned to the silent crowd still gathered at the end of the corridor, high lords, guards, servants, Isolde, every face waited for the king's next word. Azric followed my gaze. He understood. He lifted our joined hands high, the same way he had once lifted the hands of his healed family. Let it be known, he declared, voice ringing down stone in history, that tonight my queen chose my freedom over my throne. And I choose her choice. He looked at the high lords. You have your majority. The bond is sealed. But if any house still doubts, let them bring their armies. We will meet them not with swords first, but with open gates and empty thrones. Because a crown that must be defended by fear is already lost. Dead silence. Then Rager was the first to move. The old commander dropped to one knee, fist over heart. Isolde followed, silver hair pooling like moonlight. One by one, every wolf in the corridor knelt, not to the king, but to the love that had just refused to be chained. Even Lord Gavrin's knees buckled, grudging and slow. Azric pulled me against his side. Send ravens to every corner, he commanded. The wedding proceeds at dawn, and every gate stays open until the sun clears the mountains. Let the realm see what it looks like when a king trusts his people because his queen taught him how. He looked down at me, eyes blazing, and let every soul who ever felt worthless know, love is not earned by kneeling. It is proven by standing up and choosing anyway. Then, in front of the entire kneeling court, he sank to one knee again, this time not in surrender, but in celebration. He pressed his lips to the inside of my wrist, right where my pulse thundered. Thank you, he whispered, loud enough for history, for giving me a happiness worth more than any crown. I pulled him to his feet and kissed him, no hesitation, no fear, only certainty. The court rose as one with a roar that shook the rafters. Later, when the castle finally slept, Azric carried me to the highest balcony. Snow had begun to fall soft, silent, forgiving. He wrapped his cloak around us both. They will come, he said quietly. Some with congratulations, some with blades. I leaned back against his chest. Then we will greet them the same way, I said. With open hands and unafraid hearts. He rested his chin atop my head. You really believe love can stop an army? I believe love already has, I answered. 3 kingdoms knelt to their knees without a single sword drawn. A mother and 2 sons reunited on a ridge of ice. A ghost legion that chose mercy over vengeance. I turned in his arms, and tomorrow, when we stand before the realm wearing matching circlets, every wolf alive will finally understand. The strongest thing a king can do is not unbreakable. I touched the place over his heart. It's choosing to break open. He kissed me, then slow, reverent, tasting of snow and forever. Below us, the castle bells began to ring the new day. Above us, the sky lightened from black to pearl, and in the open gates stood wide, waiting for whoever dared to test what love could do when it refused to hide behind walls. Dawn was coming. The wedding was coming, and the kingdom healed, terrified, hopeful, whole held its breath one last time, not in fear, in wonder. Because the Omega who had asked to buy a king was about to marry him under open sky. With every gate thrown wide, and every heart finally free. Chapter 6. A Kingdom on Trial. The war horns were not distant for long. By the time Azric and I reached the outer parapet, the night sky to the east was already bleeding fire. 3 kingdoms, Aldrich, Viernin, and Cold Iron Solus, had chosen this night. The night the king knelt to march under one banner. Their messengers had arrived at dusk with an ultimatum: dissolve the bond, exile the Omega, or watch the 7 territories burn. Azric read the parchment once, face unreadable, then let the wind take it over the battlements. He turned to me where I stood wrapped in his cloak, moonlight still tangled in my hair. They waited until the trial ended, he said quietly. They wanted the realm divided before they struck. I looked out at the horizon. Torches moved like rivers of stars, thousands of them. How long? I asked. 3 days if we are lucky. 2 if the river freezes early. Rhaegar joined us, armor already buckled. The northern packs will stand with us. The south is uncertain. They fear what an Omega Queen means. Azric's hand found mine. Then we give them something to believe in instead of fear. He called the war council at once. No sleep, no celebration postponed. Maps were unrolled across the long table. Generals argued. Isolde stood silent in the shadows. scar silver in the torchlight. I listened until the voices blurred into panic. Then, I spoke. Send me to them. Every head turned. Azric went very still. No, hear me out, I said. They march because they think a king weakened by love is a king they can break. Let me ride out alone, under banner of parley. Let me show them what this bond actually is. Rhaegar barked a laugh. They'll put an arrow through you before you clear the gate. They won't, I said. Because I will not ride as a supplicant. I will ride as the one who passed the trial of worth. The one the mirror itself released. The one their own laws now recognize as future queen. Azric's voice was lethal quiet. If you leave these walls, I ride with you. Then we lose, I answered gently. Because they need to see you here, unbroken, unafraid, holding the throne they think I stole. They need to see me walk into their camp without you, and walk out again. Isolde stepped forward for the first time. She is right, she said. All eyes turned to the dowager who had once fled rather than watch her son be sold for peace. I ran once, it cost me everything. Let her go. Let her finish what I could not. Azric looked as though the words physically struck him. I touched his cheek. Trust the woman who bought you, I whispered. Trust that I am worth the risk. He closed his eyes, jaw clenched so tight I feared it would crack. Then he opened them and nodded once. Dawn, he said. You ride at dawn. They prepared me like a sacrifice. White cloak lined with wolf fur, no armor would say fear. Hair braided tight with silver thread. At my throat, the only jewel I wore, a single moonstone on a thin chain, Azric had fastened himself with shaking fingers. He walked me to the courtyard himself. The entire castle had gathered in silence. When he lifted me onto the white mare, his hands lingered on my waist. I will be watching from the eastern tower, he said, voice rough. If they raise a hand to you, I will ride through fire to reach you. I leaned down and kissed him soft, certain, sealing every promise we had made. Then watch closely, I said against his lips, and see what love without chains can do. The gates opened. I rode out alone. The enemy camp sprawled across the frost-covered plain like a city of iron and torchlight. 3 kings waited beneath a crimson pavilion. King Torrin of Alderaich, Queen Maeve of Arryn, and the silent Prince Regent, Kael of Solis. I stopped 10 paces from their line. Every bow was drawn, every sword half inch. I dismounted and walked the final distance on foot. Torrin spoke first, voice like gravel. The Omega who thinks she bought a kingdom with pretty words. I inclined my head, not a bow, never a bow. I bought nothing, I said clearly. I offered everything, and he accepted. That is the difference. Maeve laughed coldly. Love is a child's tale. Thrones are built on blood and treaty. Then let me offer you both, I said. I drew the scroll Isolde had pressed into my hand at dawn, unrolled it so all 3 could see the royal seals. My dowry, I said, is the unification of every debt, every old grudge, every border war your 3 realms have nursed for a century. I bring reconciliation written in the hand of Queen Mother Isolde, who abdicated her own crown to end the last great war, and countersigned by every High Lord who voted yes last night. Kael spoke for the first time, voice soft and deadly. And if we refuse, I met his pale eyes. Then you march on a kingdom whose king has already survived civil war, famine, and assassination because he refused to chain the ones he loves. You will face wolves who now fight for something greater than fear, and you will lose. I stepped closer until I stood between 3 drawn armies. But if you accept, I continued, you gain allies who will never betray you. Trade routes reopened, marriages of choice, not force, and a story every bard from here to the sea will sing for 1,000 years. The night 3 kings laid down their swords because an Omega queen taught them that love can be stronger than fear. Silence stretched, thin and sharp, as drawn wire. Torrin looked at Maeve. Maeve looked at Kael. Kael looked at me for a long time. Then, slowly, he dismounted, walked forward, and knelt, not to me, to the idea of what I carried. One by one, Torrin and Maeve followed. Behind me, on the castle walls, a roar went up that shook the frost from the stones. I did not turn. I knew what I would see. Azric, fists clenched on the parapet, tears on his face, pride and terror at war inside him. When I finally rode back through the gates at sunset, he was waiting exactly where I had left him. He did not speak. He simply opened his arms. I walked into them, and the entire courtyards, soldiers, cooks, children. Isolde watched their king hold their queen like she had just pulled the moon from the sky and handed it to him. Later, when the treaties were signed and the armies turned homeward, he carried me to the highest tower and sat me on the parapet so the wind could tangle my hair. You rode into 3 armies, he whispered, voice raw with wonder, and brought me peace instead of war. I smiled, tired to my bones but shining with it. I promised you freedom, I said. This is what it looks like. He rested his forehead against mine. Then I am the richest wolf alive. Far below, the castle bells began to ring not the toll of war, but the song of wedding bells. Because tomorrow, under that same moon, the king would marry the Omega who had bought him with nothing but truth, and the kingdom finally fully would kneel, not because they were forced, but because they had seen love win. Chapter 7, The Vote That Could Break Us. The wedding was set for the first night of the new moon, 3 days away. For 48 hours the castle sang. Banners were sewn, wine casks rolled out, every hearth blazed with pine and cedar. Children practiced throwing white petals until their fingers smelled like jasmine for days. Even the ravens on the battlements seemed to croak in softer voices. Azric and I barely saw each other. Tradition demanded we spend the nights apart until the vows. He sent me notes on scraps of parchment carried by amused guards. I miss the sound of you breathing. The moon feels wrong without you under it. I am counting heartbeats until I can kneel again, this time with a ring. I kept every note tucked inside my sleeve like secret stars. On the second night I slipped away from the laughing seamstresses and climbed the narrow servants' stair to the dowager's old solar. Isolde had asked to see me alone. She was waiting by the window, moonlight cutting silver through her hair. In her hands she held a small wooden box. I have something for you, she said without greeting, and something to confess. She opened the box. Inside lay a circlet of black iron and moonstone, smaller than a crown, older than the castle itself. The metal was warm to the touch. This belonged to the first Omega who ever stood where you stood, she said. The one the mirror showed you. She never got to wear it. I did not as queen, but as penance. She placed it gently on my head. It fit as though it had been waiting centuries for me. Then she knelt. I stepped back, startled. Please don't. I must, she said, voice trembling for the first time since her return. 15 years ago I stood in a circle very like the one you faced. They asked me the same question they asked you. I chose the crown over my son's happiness. I thought peace was worth any price. Her scarred fingers closed around mine. I sold him to a treaty. I told myself it was duty. I watched him turn hard and cold and alone. Moons helped me. I was proud of it. Because the realm stood. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I was wrong. You were right. And I have carried that wrong like a blade in my heart every day since I fled. She looked up at me. I came back to cast the vote that would have saved him or doom him. I thought I would vote no, force him to be the king I thought the world needed. But when you said you would take the crown from him if it poisoned him, I saw the daughter I never deserved. She pressed something else into my palm, a small silver key. This opens the old king's vault beneath the throne room. Inside is the original founding pact before the binding. Laws were twisted. It says a monarch may rule with a chosen equal, Omega or Alpha, if love is proven stronger than blood right. The High Lords buried that clause centuries ago. Tomorrow, at the ceremony, you will read it aloud. They cannot stop you once the words are spoken under open sky. I stared at the key, then at her. Why risk everything now? Because, she whispered, I want my son to have the one thing I stole from him, the right to choose his own heart. She rose, kissed my forehead like a mother blessing a bride, and left without another word. I stood alone under the moon, crown warm on my brow, key burning in my hand, and felt the future shift beneath my feet. Dawn of the wedding day broke cold and clear. The great courtyard had been transformed into an open-air cathedral of white silk and evergreen. Thousands gathered, wolves from every territory. The 3 foreign monarchs who had knelt 2 nights ago now seated in places of honor. Even the kitchen children perched on the walls. Azric waited beneath an arch of living wolfsbane and moonflowers, dressed in simple black, no crown because he had refused to wear one until I placed it on him myself. I walked the aisle alone. No one gave me away. I had bought myself with my own courage. When I reached him, his eyes were already wet. The High Seer began the ancient words. Halfway through, when she asked if any soul freely bound itself to soul, I stepped forward. I have one addition, I said, voice carrying to the farthest corner. I drew out the original founding pact, yellowed but unbroken, and began to read the buried clause. Gasps turned to stunned silence as the forgotten words rang out. Let love proven by trial and truth stand equal to blood. Let no crown outweigh a heart freely given and freely taken. When I finished, I looked at the High Lord's Gavrin's face was purple. Rager was grinning like a wolf who had just won a war. Azric's eyes asked the question he could not voice. I smiled and placed the small black circlet on his brow first. Then I handed him its twin. He knelt again, in front of the entire world, and set the matching circlet on my head. Equals, he said, loud enough for history, now and always. We rose together. The roar that followed shook snow from the mountains. Later, when the feasting was loud and the moon high, I found Isolde on the same balcony where Azric and I had once watched armies approach. She was crying quietly. He's happy, she said without turning. Truly happy. I never thought I would live to see it. I stood beside her. You gave him that, I said. The key, the clause, the vote. She shook her head. No, you did. I only stopped standing in the way. We watched the courtyard below Azric, laughing with Torin and Maeve, children weaving between legs, throwing petals, Rager dancing badly with a blushing kitchen maid. Isolde spoke again, softer. There is one last thing. She handed me a folded letter, sealed in black wax. From the Northern Scouts. Delivered an hour ago. I broke the seal. The words were simple, written in a hurried hand. The exiled prince of Soliscale's younger brother who was supposed to be dead, is alive. He did not kneel with the others. He is raising a shadow army in the ice wastes. He claims the true crown was stolen from his line the night Isolde fled. He marches south. He wants the king's head, and the Omega who bewitched him. I looked up. Across the courtyard, Azric's gaze found mine through the crowd. He tilted his head. Something is wrong. I forced a smile and slipped the letter into my sleeve. Not tonight. Tonight was ours. Tomorrow we would face the last shadow. But tonight, under new moons and old vows, the king danced with his queen, both of them crowned by choice instead of blood, and for one perfect turn of the stars, the kingdom forgot how to fear. Chapter 8. The Mother Who Sold Her Son. The letter burned against my ribs all night. I danced with Azric until my feet ached and the stars blurred. I laughed when he spun me beneath garlands of moonflowers. I kissed him slow and sweet in the shadow of the great hearth while the court pretended not to watch. But every time the music paused, I heard the same words repeating. He is coming for the king's head, and the Omega who bewitched him. At dawn, the celebrations ended. The castle woke to a sky the color of old bruises. Azric found me in the map room, staring at the north as though I had stared at approaching armies only days ago. He knew instantly. Tell me, he said. I handed him the letter. He read it once, then again, then folded it with deliberate calm and slid it into his belt. Cale's brother Cassian, he said. I thought the ice took him 15 years ago. So did everyone. Azric rubbed a hand over his face. Cassian was barely 16 when Mother fled. He blamed me for driving her away. If he's alive, he's had 15 years to nurse that wound into madness. He looked at me, eyes suddenly ancient, and he will use the one thing that can hurt me most, you. I stepped close, laid my palms over his heart. Then we take that weapon away from him, I said. We ride north, together, before he reaches the populated valleys. Azric's arms came around me like steel bands. I just got you, he whispered against my hair. I will not lose you to ice and vengeance. You won't, I promised. Because this time I am not riding out to parley. I am riding out to end it. We left at midday, only 20 riders. Me, Ryger, Isolde, and a hand-picked guard. The rest of the army would follow in forced march. But we needed speed more than numbers. The journey took 4 days through snow that grew deeper with every mile. On the 4th night we made camp in the ruins of an old watchtower overlooking the glacial wastes. Azric and I stood on the broken parapet, cloaks whipping in the wind. Far below, torchlight flickered. Kashin's army, smaller than feared, but moving fast. Azric spoke without looking at me. I used to dream he was still alive, he said. That he would come home and forgive me for being the son who stayed. I slipped my gloved hand into his. He isn't coming home, love. He's coming to burn it. Azric nodded once. Then he turned and kissed me slow, deliberate, like a man memorizing the taste of sunlight before walking into eternal night. Behind us, Isolde approached, hood dusted with snow. I need to speak to him, she told me. Alone. I hesitated. Azric squeezed my fingers. Go keep Rhaegar from drinking all the brandy, he said softly. I'll find you. I left them on the tower in the wind. I did not hear what was said, but an hour later, Isolde came down alone. Her face was wet, though the cold should have frozen any tears. She stopped in front of me. I told him everything, she said. How I arranged his betrothal to a soulless princess for peace. How Cassian overheard and begged me not to sell his brother. How I sent Cassian away that same night, told him he was a danger to the treaty. How I let the world believe the ice took him so no one would look. Her voice cracked. He forgave me, she whispered. Moons helped me. He forgave me. Then she pressed something into my hand. A second letter. Older, edges soft with handling. Cassian wrote this the night I exiled him. I carried it like a curse for 15 years. Give it to him when the time is right. I tucked it away without reading it. At dawn we rode down into the wastes. Cassian waited on a ridge of black ice, alone, white cloak snapping like a battle standard. He looked exactly like Azric might have at 20, same storm gray eyes. Same sharp bones but carved from bitterness instead of duty. Azric dismounted and walked forward until only 20 paces separated them. I stayed on my horse, heart hammering. Cassian spoke first, still hiding behind Omega's brother. Azric's voice was steady. I hide behind no one. I stand beside the bravest soul I have ever known. Kashin's gaze flicked to me, cold and cutting. She will die for you. They all do. She will live for me, Azric answered, because I finally learned how to live for her. Cassian laughed sharp, broken glass. Pretty words. Mother taught you well. Isolde urged her horse forward then, stopping between her sons. Kashin's face twisted. You, he spat. The whore who sold us both. Isolde did not flinch. I was a coward, she said clearly. I thought peace was worth any price. I was wrong. And I have spent every day since trying to buy back the years I stole from you both. She drew the old letter from her cloak, the one she had carried like pen and sand, held it out. Cassian stared at it as though it were poison. Read it, she said, or burn it. But hear me first. I am riding into your camp tonight, alone. You may take my life as payment for the one I took from you. But you will leave Azric and Lyria in peace. Azric made a strangled sound. No. Isolde turned to him, eyes fierce with love. You forgave me once already, she said. Let me earn it this time. Kashin's hand trembled on his sword hilt. For a long moment the wind was the only sound. Then Cassian spoke, voice raw. I do not want your death, mother. I wanted you to choose me once. Just once. Isolde dismounted, walked forward until she stood an arm's length from the son she had lost. She sank slowly to her knees in the snow. I choose you now, she said. And I choose him. And I choose the future they are building. Take me if vengeance demands it. But know this. The boy I sent away lives in the man who forgave me last night. He is worth more than both our regrets. Cassian stared at her a long time. Then, very slowly, he reached down and pulled her to her feet. His voice, when it came, was the voice of a boy who had waited 15 years for someone to come back. I am tired, he said. Tired of hating. Tired of cold. He looked past her to Azric. Call off your army, brother. I will call off mine. Let us go home. Azric's shoulders sagged with relief so profound he swayed. Cassian turned to me last. You, he said, almost wonderingly. You really did buy a king. I smiled, small and tired and true. No, I said. I set one free. There is a difference. That night, beneath a sky full of northern fire, two brothers embraced for the first time since they were children, while their mother stood between them and cried without shame. And I watched from the ridge, snowflakes catching in my lashes, and understood something the trial had never asked of me. The greatest price was never mine to pay, it was theirs to forgive. Chapter 9. The Last Vote. We rode home under a sky that refused to choose between dawn and dusk. Cassian rode at Azric's left, Isolde at his right. I rode just behind, close enough to touch Azric's cloak if I reached, far enough to give the three of them the space 15 lost years demanded. No one spoke much. Words felt too small for what had happened on that ridge of black ice. When Castle Vale appeared on the horizon, its banners flying the silver wolf on midnight blue, a cry went up from the watchtowers. By the time we passed beneath the portcullis, the entire population had poured into the courtyard silent, stunned, weeping. They had prepared for war. They received a miracle instead. Azric dismounted first. He turned and lifted me down as though I were made of glass. Then he did something that would be painted on every chapel wall for centuries. He took my hand, took Cassian's, took Isolde's, and raised all four together above our heads. "This is your royal house," he declared, voice ringing to the rafters. "Whole again, healed by truth, not by blood. Swear to it." The roar that answered shook snow from the rooftops. That night the castle feasted again, but it was different. Quieter songs, slower dances, tears mixed with laughter. Cassian sat at Azric's right for the first time in his life. Isolde sat at mine. When the bard sang of the Omega who bought a king, Cassian lifted his cup to me with a crooked smile that looked almost like his brother's. Peace, it seemed, had finally come home. It lasted exactly 9 days. On the 10th morning, a rider arrived from the far south half dead, horse-lathered, bearing the broken seal of House Gavron. Azric broke the wax in the council chamber. I stood at his side. Cassian, Isolde, Rager, and the remaining High Lords waited in tense silence. The message was short. Gavron and 3 southern houses had declared the reconciliation treason. They had crowned a new king in the southern citadel, Lord Gavron's eldest son, a boy of 19. They named Azric the crowned thrall and me the Omega witch who broke the realm. They gave us 1 moon to abdicate or face excommunication and war. Azric read it aloud once, voice perfectly calm. Then he laid the parchment on the table and looked at each face in the room. "This is the last vote," he said. "Not mine, yours." He turned to the High Lords who had once sat in the circle of 7. "You watched Lyria pass the trial of worth. You watched 3 kingdoms kneel. You watched a family heal. Now the South offers you a choice. Stand with the past, or stand with the future we are building." One by one, they knelt. Even the 2 who had voted against me in the circle. Rhaegar spoke for them all. "We ride south at dawn, my king, and we end this before it begins." Azric nodded. Then he looked at me. I knew what he was asking without words. I stepped forward. "No," I said clearly. "We do not ride to war." Every jaw dropped. "We ride to coronation." I turned to Cassian. "You were raised in the South for the first 10 years of your life. The people there still remember Prince Cassian, the boy who used to sneak bread to starving tenant children. They never believed you died." Cassian's eyes widened. I faced the council. "Gavron crowned a boy because he needed a puppet. We will give the South a king they already loved and thought lost. Cassian will ride south not as conqueror, but as the rightful heir returning. The southern houses will open their gates before a single sword is drawn." I looked at Azric. "And you will stay here. Because a kingdom needs its heart while its hand extends mercy." Azric's face went through a storm of emotions. Pride, fear, love. Cassian stood slowly. "You would trust me with half your realm." "I would trust the man who chose forgiveness on a ridge of ice," I said. "Yes." Isolde rose to. "I ride with him," she said. "The South remembers me as well. Let them see the dowager who fled return beside the son she wronged. Let them see penance and pride in the same breath." Azric looked at me a long moment. Then he smiled, small, fierce, devastating. "You truly did buy a kingdom," he said softly, "and turned it into something no one can break." 3 days later, Cassian and Isolde rode south with 5,000 volunteers who sang as they marched. Azric and I watched from the same eastern tower where he had once watched me ride to parley. When the banners disappeared beyond the horizon, he pulled me against his chest. "They will come back crowned or in chains," he murmured. "They will come back crowned," I answered, "because love is louder than fear now." He rested his chin atop my head. "And if Gavron refuses mercy," I turned in his arms, "then we will ride together. But I do not think we will need to." I was right. 17 days later, a single rider returned at dawn. Cassian, alone. He dismounted in the courtyard, covered in road dust, and smiling like the sun. He walked straight to Azric and dropped to one knee. "The south kneels," he said, voice hoarse with wonder. Every gate opened, every banner lowered. They wept when they saw Mother alive. They wept harder when they saw me. He looked up. "They crowned me Prince Regent of the South in your name." Gavron and his son took vows of exile before the entire court. They sail for the summer isles at springtide. Azric hauled his brother into a crushing embrace. When they parted, Cassian turned to me and bowed deep, formal, perfect. "My queen," he said, "the realm is whole." That night, beneath a sky full of spring stars, Azric led me to the throne room. The great obsidian throne had been replaced. In its place stood 2 chairs identical, carved from the same ancient wolf folk, side by side. He took my hand and we sat together for the first time as equals. Below us, the court knelt not because law demanded it, but because love had earned it. And above the twin thrones, a new tapestry had already been hung, an Omega in white offering everything to a king in black. The king on his knees, and between their joined hands, golden threads spelled the words that ended every chronicle from that day forward. She asked if she could buy a king. He answered, "You already own me, and I have never been more free." Chapter 10, The War We Chose. For 3 perfect moons the realm knew peace. Spring turned to summer, wheat ripened gold in the south. The northern ice melted into rivers that sang instead of roared. Children born the year Azric took the throne now ran through the courtyard calling Cassian uncle and Isolde grandmother. The tapestry of the kneeling king was copied in every village square. We thought the story was over. We were wrong. It began with silence. First 1 border village, then 3, then an entire valley stopped sending letters. Riders returned with empty hands and haunted eyes. They spoke of mist that moved against the wind, of wolves that vanished mid-howl, of a voice on the night air, whispering the same sentence in 100 different tongues. The price was never paid in full. Azric summoned the council at midnight. Maps were unrolled. Scouts reported the same impossible thing, an army gathering in the Shadow Marsh's land that had been cursed and empty since the founding wars. No banners, no supply lines, only black armor and helms shaped like screaming wolves. At their head rode a single figure in silver. The High Seer, who had guided my trial, went pale as bone. "That land belongs to the unmade," she whispered. "The old kings who refused to accept the founding pact. They swore one day the realm would pay the debt of love with blood." Azric's hand found mine under the table. "What debt?" he demanded. The seer's blind eyes turned to me. The clause Lyria read aloud, the one that made love equal to blood right, was signed in blood by every founding house, except one, House Nocturne. They were struck from the rolls and driven into the marches. "The pact says the debt unpaid returns 7-fold. Cassian leaned forward. "How many fight under the Silver Rider?" "None," the seer said. "They are already dead. The unmade do not march with the living." The chamber went cold. Azric stood. "Then we meet them with the living, every pack, every banner, and blade. We end this before it reaches the heartland." But that night, alone in our chambers, he held me too tightly. "I will not let ghosts take you from me," he said against my neck. I pulled back. "They are not coming for you, Azric. They are coming for me." I spoke the words that woke them. His face went savage with fear. "Then I will stand in front of you until the stars fall." I kissed him slow, fierce, tasting goodbye. Neither of us wanted to speak. "No," I said. "This time I stand in front." 3 days later, we rode out together at the head of the largest host the 7 territories had ever gathered. Cassian commanded the left-wing rager, the right. Isolde rode with the healers, silver hair braided like armor. The shadow marches met us with fog that swallowed sound. We made camp on the last solid ground before the mist. That night the silver rider appeared alone at the edge of torchlight. He removed his helm. The face beneath was beautiful and terrible, high cheekbones, black hair, eyes like frozen moonlight. A circlet of broken iron rested on his brow. He looked exactly like Azric might have looked if love had never touched him. "I am Nocturne," he said, voice soft as grave dirt. "Last of the line you erased. The pact was broken when love was placed above blood. One heart must balance the scale." He looked straight at me. The heart of the Omega who spoke the forbidden clause. Azric stepped forward, sword half drawn. "Take mine instead." Nocturne smiled, sad and ancient. "That is not how debts work, my king." Then he was gone, swallowed by mist. That night I slipped from our tent while Azric slept. I walked into the fog, carrying only the small black circlet I had worn the day I passed the trial. Nocturne waited exactly where I knew he would be, on a broken bridge, above a river of black water. "You came alone," he observed. "I came to pay," I said. He studied me. "You would die for him." "I would live for him," I corrected. "But if my life is the price of every life behind me, I pay it gladly." Nocturne tilted his head. "And if I told you the price is not your death, but his crown and yours? Abdicate. Let the pact return to blood right alone. Love once again beneath law. Then the unmade sleep forever." I laughed once, soft and unafraid. "You still do not understand," I said. "Love is not beneath law anymore. It is the law. And I will not trade one cage for another." I stepped closer. "So here is my counteroffer. Take my heart if you must. But know this. The moment it stops beating, every wolf in that camp will feel it through the bond I forged with their king. They will march through your mist and tear your army apart with their bare hands, not for a crown, for love. And love, Nocturne, has already won." The mist swirled. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across his perfect face. Behind me, footsteps crunched on frost. Azric emerged from the fog, sword sheathed, hands open. He walked until he stood at my side. "You want a heart?" he asked quietly. "Take mine, but not in death." He drew a dagger, sliced his palm, and let blood drip onto the broken stones of the bridge. "I offer it in life. Rule beside us. Not as enemy, but as the eighth house restored. Let the pact be made whole by mercy instead of murder." Nocturne stared at the blood hit the stones. The mist began to scream. Thousands of shadowy figures appeared, ghosts in broken armor, eyes burning with centuries of rage. Nocturne raised a hand. They froze. He looked at Azric, then at me, then at our joined hands. "Mercy," he repeated, tasting the word like poison or medicine. I stepped forward and placed the black circlet in his bleeding palm. "This belonged to your ancestor," I said. "The first Omega who tried to choose love and was punished for it. Wear it or destroy it. But the choice is yours now." The ghosts wailed. Nocturne closed his fist around the circlet. The scream of the mist became a sigh. Slowly, one by one, the shadows knelt. Nocturne sank last. When he rose again, the circlet rested on his brow, and the mist was only mist. "The debt," he said, voice no longer cold, "is paid in the only currency that ever mattered." He turned and walked into the fog. The army of the unmade dissolved with the dawn. We rode home in sunlight. No banners lost, no graves dug, only a new tapestry added to the great hall. An Omega and a king, hand in hand, offering a circlet to a kneeling shadow. And beneath it, in letters of living gold, "Love did not break the realm. It remembered the missing piece." Chapter 11. The day the king knelt again forever. 10 years later, the great courtyard of Castle Vale was filled with the sound of children laughing. Not the polite laughter of courtiers, but the wild, barefoot, sun-drenched kind that only happens when the world has forgotten how to be afraid. I stood on the eastern steps and watched. A girl of 9 black curls, storm-gray eyes, and a smile sharp enough to cut glass, was chasing her younger brother through the rose beds. He shrieked with delight as she pretended she couldn't catch him. Around them ran a pack of other children. Cassian's red-haired twins, Rhaegar's youngest boy, even a shy dark-eyed girl who belonged to Nocturne and the quiet healer he had married 5 summers ago. At the heart of the chaos stood Azric. He had let his hair grow long again, tied back with a simple leather cord. The black circlet rested on his brow, but it was scuffed now, worn every day, not just like mine. He was on one knee in the grass, arms wide, while our daughter launched herself at him like a small, fierce comet. "Papa, you promised to be the monster today." Azric growled theatrically and scooped her up, tossing her high until she squealed. Our son 7, solemn and already too clever, tugged at his father's cloak. "My turn next. And I want the wings." Azric obliged, lifting both children at once, one on each shoulder, roaring until the roses trembled. I felt the laughter rise in my chest, the same way it always did when I watched them like sunrise after a lifetime of night. A shadow fell across the steps beside me. Nocturne stood there, silver circlet catching the light, his once cold face softened by years and love. "They grow fast," he said quietly. "Too fast," I answered. He watched Azric spin the children until they were dizzy and breathless. "I used to think love was weakness," he said. "I was wrong. It is the only strength that never runs out." I smiled. "Took you long enough to admit it." He huffed a soft laugh. "Some debts take centuries to pay." Behind us, the great doors opened. Isolde stepped out, silver hair braided with summer flowers, leaning on Cassian's arm. She caught my eye and lifted one brow. "Your husband is going to drop them one day," she warned. "He hasn't yet," I said. She snorted, but her eyes were wet. The children finally tired of the monster game and scattered to chase butterflies. Azric rose, grass-stained and grinning, and climbed the steps 2 at a time until he reached me. He did not speak. He simply wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, rested his chin on my shoulder, and breathed me in like he still couldn't believe I was real. Our daughter ran up, cheeks flushed. "Mama, Papa said when I'm older I can learn to use a sword, but only if you say yes." I raised an eyebrow at Azric. He lifted both hands in surrender. She asked nicely. I knelt so I was eye level with her. "You may learn," I said, "on one condition." She waited, solemn. "That you also learn when not to use it." She considered this, then nodded once, exactly the way her father did when he had made up his mind. "Deal." She ran off again. Azric pulled me to my feet and stole a kiss that tasted like summer and promises kept. That evening the entire castle gathered in the great hall for the festival of first light, the night we celebrated the day the unmade knelt and the realm chose love over fear. The twin thrones still stood side by side, but tonight they were empty. Instead, Azric and I sat on the steps below them, surrounded by children and wolves and family. A new tapestry had been unveiled that morning. It covered the entire northern wall. The original scene, me and white Azric on his knees, was still there, but now the image continued. To the left, 3 kings and a queen laying down swords. To the right, Cassian and Isolde returning crowned in mercy. At the center, Nocturne offering his circlet to a circle of living wolves. And above it all, in letters of gold that caught every torch flame. She asked if she could buy a king. He answered, "You already own me." And I was never the one in chains. When the bard finished the final verse, the hall fell quiet. Our daughter climbed into Azric's lap. Our son curled against my side. She looked up at the tapestry, then at us. "Why does Papa kneel in the picture?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Azric and I shared a look. He lifted her so she straddled his knee, the way he had the day she was born. "Because," he said softly, "a long time ago, your mama was brave enough to love me when I didn't know how to be loved. She offered everything she had, and I realized the strongest thing a king can do is admit he is already conquered." He glanced at me, eyes shining, so I knelt. Not because I had to, because I finally understood I wanted to. Our daughter considered this with the gravity only children possess. Then she turned to me. "Did it hurt?" she asked, giving everything away. I brushed a curl from her forehead. "Only for a moment," I said. "Then it felt like flying." She nodded, satisfied, and laid her head on Azric's chest. Around us, the hall exhaled 1,000 wolves breathing the same quiet joy. Later, when the children slept and the torches burned low, Azric led me to the highest balcony, the same one where we had once watched armies approach and then watched them turn back. The kingdom stretched below us, peaceful, golden, whole. He pulled me against his chest, arms around my waist, palms spread over the place where our third child already stirred. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "The price you paid that night in the throne room?" I turned in his arms. "Never," I said, "because I didn't buy a King Azric. I bought a future where no one ever has to kneel again unless they choose to." He smiled the same crooked, devastating smile that had stopped an entire kingdom's heart 10 years ago. Then, slowly, deliberately, he sank to one knee right there on the moonlit stone. Not in surrender, in celebration. He took my hand and pressed it over his heart. "You still own me, little star," he whispered. "Every beat, every breath, forever." I pulled him up and kissed him until the stars blurred. Somewhere below, a child laughed in her sleep. Above us, the moon, old witness, old friend, shone down on a world that had learned a new law. Love is not weakness. Love is not chains. Love is the only crown that never weighs anything at all. And in every village square, in every song, in every heart that beat beneath the silver wolf banner, the story ended the same way. She asked if she could buy a king. He answered, "You already did. And I have never been more free." Fade out on two silhouettes against the moon, one in white, one in black, hands entwined, crowns glinting side by side. The king who knelt, the Omega who bought him, and the kingdom that finally learned how to stand tall on its knees. If this story made your heart race, your eyes tear up, or your soul whisper love can actually win, then don't let it end here. Hit that like button so this tale of a king who knelt and an Omega who refused to break reaches every heart that still believes in impossible love. Subscribe and ring the bell. New episodes drop every week, and the finale will wreck you in the best way. Comment below your favorite moments so far. Was it the throne room proposal, the mirror scene, or the moment Azric knelt in the snow? I read every single one. Share this series with the one person who needs to remember that real power looks like open hands, not clenched fists. And if you want to carry this story with you forever, the full paperback plus exclusive art book, The King Who Knelt, is coming soon. Join the waitlist in the link below, top of description, to be the first to hold Lyria and Azric's love in your hands. Because some stories aren't just watched, they're lived. See you in the next episode, little star. The king is still on his knees, and the best part is only beginning.